This is Wild About Liberty, where the community joins together. Now, here's your host, Terry Wild.
Thank you for tuning in to Wild About Liberty. We're going to have a really good show today. We have our guest, Richard Bailey, who is a regular on the program, and we just love to see you, Richard. Good morning.
Well, I'm glad to be here on this fine day, and we're looking forward to getting into it.
Well, there's a lot of things to talk about. We've got the local election information. People are running that we really like both people in the primary stage. And so it's kind of hard to pick one, isn't it?
Well, I think when you have good choices, you just have to be glad about that. And I think at this point, we're blessed with just a plethora of really great people.
What do you think of the race for assembly with George Rodanovich and David Tanglapa?
Well,
young, old, new.
They're both great guys. I mean, I like both of them. You can talk to both of them. They've got great values. So I just think people have to make their choice.
Well, that's what we did. We put them both out there. We like both of them, and so we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting because, first of all, George has so much experience. He's qualified. He knows his way around the whole political system. David is new, but he's energetic. He's fresh. So it's just hard to pick.
Well, George is easy to talk to. You get in there and you chat with him, and it's like you've been friends forever. David has great ideas. And he's motivated. He's a go-getter. So I just think you can't go wrong. I mean, no matter how it turns out, we have a great representative.
Well, let's talk about some of the races because it's really down to the wire. It's just days away. And so, for example, everybody has been trying to beat Jim Costa, Kevin Cookingham, and on. And now we've got a great guy with Michael Maher. And do you have any feel for that race?
Well, he came very close last time.
Yeah.
And he'll be wonderful. He's going to keep at it, and when he gets in there, he's going to be a wonderful representative. He's got a background inside the system and in law enforcement and in military and business. He's got everything going for him. He's a straight shooter. He's a wonderful Christian. I just think he's a person that when you meet him, you want to be his friend, and he basically talks to you like a human being. So I am very proud to know him, and I'm looking forward to him getting in office.
Well, Michael has a lot of good ideas. He is raring to go, but, Jim Costa has owned that seat forever, and he has some kind of, connection with the status quo, with the local ag industry. And but then let's talk about this a little bit because you're the one that really highlighted the fact that there was a lot of talk about fraud in the last election, and maybe he should have won, but the numbers weren't there. What's your view on that whole fraud thing?
Well, that's the current landscape. In other words, in order to win, Republicans have to win by an extra, a couple points.
What would you put it at? 2 points?
No, 2 to 5 points. Maybe, 2 or 3 points. So
that's huge.
The point is, it's what you need is a wave election, and with respect to the current occupant, Costa has been bad for a number of constituencies. I mean, he was responsible for the wave of incarcerations of minority people.
Mm-hmm.
He was involved in that. He's been, as far as people that are working in agriculture, what has he done for them? He's been in there for years and years. As far as water, he's terrible. In other words, the thing is, we have been sitting on a situation which could be wonderful, but it's not. And you have to look to Jim Costa as the guy right in the middle.
Gotta
of
get a little closer to the mic.
Oh, sorry. the person right in the middle of it. So at this point, um, we're going to keep working at it. And at this point, Michael Mayer is the guy, and I'm going to keep pushing for him.
Well, then we have this other race with McCarthy's seat that he vacated, and there's 12 people running for that seat, but the real serious candidates, I think, are just 3. But Sheriff Mike Boudreau, boy, I like him.
He's wonderful. He's a straight shooter, and at this point, I don't have a good feel for that one, but I like Mike.
Well, the main thing is that Mike has real ideas. I mean, he has solutions. He has been active in Tulare and the whole county as a sheriff. He knows the landscape, but he's got enormous talent and ability. His ideas, for example, nuclear power. Let's restore and develop safe, reliable nuclear power. What's your thought on that?
Well, right now, clean nuclear is hot, and it's many reactors, the ones where you stick them on the back of a truck and haul them to any location. Those things are they're self-contained. They're extremely safe. I mean, this is essentially the kind of reactor they used in nuclear submarines for, 50, 60, 70 years,
right,
without any major incidents. So this is the kind of future that nuclear has. You don't have to put some big cement dome over a reactor that relies on outside cooling. These are self-contained, and theoretically you could drop them out of an airplane and they'd be just fine.
Now, people don't know that, though.
Well,
the scaremongers, what got us out of nuclear was this mantra, this typical 30, 40 years of telling us about the green problem and the carbon footprint and all these exaggerations and misrepresentations of our ecology, our energy, gas-driven cars and trucks and the whole electric thing. So it seems we should be aware. We should know what's going on by now, don't you think?
No, Terry, that people are not stupid. 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, those things were, it takes 1 or 2 of those incidents that sort of makes that whole industry poison.
Right.
Radioactive, more or less. So it's the job of the new set of technologists to sell it. I'm not going to try to do that. Although I've been following that in my daily update. That is right now the wave of the future. We can put those things in small locations, or we can put them in a bank and have them do a region, but you don't have to have with the nuclear plants like the ones we have in California, the one we have in California, which supplies a lot of our energy. You don't have to have some multi-billion-dollar installation that that creates waste and everything else. They can recycle some of the fuel. It's great, and then also they have new fuels coming in which don't present the same kind of problem that uranium does. So the technology is now
safer, better,
21st century technology, and I'm looking forward to it because it would be helpful, and it would take the power away from the hands of central bureaucrats. You have these things and you license them and you put them on a site, and they can be used for local purposes.
Well, I think the issues are starting to become, they're being talked about. Like Mike is talking about nuclear energy. He's also talking about self-sustaining water generation, and his ideas about water is just so simple. When you listen to it, it's like come on, why is it? That's so easy to do. It's not even difficult. So we've been stuck with this water problem in the Central Valley with Costa and that whole mentality. People have to begin to see that we're being played.
Well, when Devin Nunes was first running for office, he wrote an article that that explained what was happening. In other words, he was told privately that there's a interest in California of basically turning the Central Valley into a desert, and in our family, we were involved in the original California Water Project. And had it been built out, we would have had surplus water that would have made any kind of drought invisible. You would have had water, ample water, for 7 to 10 years, had you built out the whole thing. But now the people that were involved in that project moved on, and now we have the Silicon Valley group that doesn't really care about regular folks. They are, and they're the deep pockets that are pushing this destroy California mentality.
But it's tied into a bigger picture, isn't it? It goes way beyond, California is kind of the poster boy. But this, at one time, I grew up, say, for example, with the John Birch Society people. They had a reputation of being conspiracy theorists. They were all kinds of, crazy. And if you even associated with them, it kind of affected you. People would look at you funny, and the business world would look at you a little funny. But they seem to be correct on everything, communism and the Federal Reserve Bank and the Bilderbergers and the whole, what we're now seeing come to the front. They're not even trying to hide it from us. But it seems like that's been going on. That's one of the reasons we don't have water, for example.
Well, the John Birch Society are wonderful people, and they come from the same kind of people that I grew up with. However, you can either frame it as conspiracy or you can frame it as demographics. And the demographics in California went from post-war working class to Silicon Valley, which are a bunch of people divorced from reality that have adopted really toxic points of view. When it comes to water, we're sitting right off the coast from an inexhaustible supply of water. And you don't see desalination happening in California in major cities. You don't see the water project being built out. So you have, at one point the Democrats and the Republicans agreed to build out this state-of-the-art, nothing like it in the world, water project. But we still have alternatives.
When was that? When did that project?
1940s.
1940s.
1940s and 50s is when they thought about it, and then they started building it. So they went from using groundwater for a lot of irrigation to building a whole series of dams, especially in the Central Valley, and as a result, we have the most productive agriculture in the world. So, and it supports communities. So the idea of a few very wealthy people adopting crazy ideas is a little different than some kind of worldwide conspiracy. So I'm a big fan of looking at the demographics and seeing how it's changing.
What was your family connection to that? How were you involved?
Oh, Visalia water lawyers.
Okay.
And they litigated water problems, and they also were involved in the initial foundation of the water project. And it was, in other words, we had water wars in California for decades.
Yeah.
And what projects like the Friant Dam and the Terminus Dam and all the dams up and down California, what that did is they eliminated that particular set of problems. And it was a revolution and basically we're still benefiting from that.
So when we look at how to solve problems, this is what I'm being impressed with. The Republican movement, call it that, is rising up. We're the only ones that have solutions. We're the only ones that are saying, well, we can fix this, we can move on, we can make things better. The other side, they're just hammering us down. No, we have to, give up gas. We can't explore. We can't drill. We can't go offshore. And that's just crazy.
The tide of history is running in our favor right now. In other words, a bunch of predatory elites that have, worked the system for the last couple generations, they don't have anything to sell.
Well, who are they? Give us some names. Who are some of the players that we know in California, we'll say?
Well, I mean,
Bill Gates, that's what comes to my mind.
The 8 families in San Francisco that have essentially run the Congress, and like Gavin Newsom,
Pelosi,
our vice president, Pelosi, all those people come from a tight-knit group of people that have been the Willie Brown group, Jesse Unruh, all those guys. That has been a sort of a tight-knit group that, because California is the largest state, ended up controlling Congress, and essentially their pattern for the way California is run is just like the Old South. They have a bunch of elite folks that basically don't really care about lifting people up. They care about getting what they can out of the system. So they've hit a wall. Right now, all over the world, people like in Argentina, Italy, Holland, Hungary, France, Germany, El Salvador, you name
Italy.
Italy, big time.
Yeah.
You're seeing Donald Trump showing up everywhere.
Right.
And the point is that the people, the globalists hit a wall, and everybody understands that what they are asking for is not viable, and people want good schools, they want safe streets, they want an economy that works for them.
Well, they don't want to pay $6 a gallon for gas.
Yes. So the point is, the old school guys are verbalizing. Nobody believes anymore. In other words, it's a laugher when you look at the stuff. Woke whatever, woke grow and go broke is the short way of saying that the bad guys lost.
Right.
So and we have, for instance, California, our antiquated forest management practices, rather than managing with current technology, ended up with us losing a third of our forest. And you can just go up in the hills here and see the devastation caused by lack of forest management. Well, that goes to schools, it goes to roads. In California, we have the worst roads in the country. We have some of the worst schools in the country. So you can see that
in the world.
In the world, yes. And so when it comes to that that old school sort of Old South power structure, it's over. And the people that basically went to Davos didn't include Donald Trump and didn't include all the people that are now coming into power. So that whole idea of some little group of people in a bunker in Germany running the world,
Brussels,
that's the same bunch of people that were the 8 families in San Francisco. So it's regular folks have just said, we've had enough, and they're doing that everywhere.
So how do you handicap that? So we've been losing. We have a supermajority in California. They can do whatever they want to do. They're passing crazy, stupid laws. They're unconstitutional. They're obscene, and yet they just do what they want to do. So how can we? Well, let me put it another way. Every primary election, Republicans stay home. They do not come out in full force, and so we keep losing. How can we take this good news that really is good news? I mean, I feel it in my bones. I'm almost uncomfortable feeling optimistic, but I do. I feel optimistic with Trump. I feel optimistic with people that are coming up and running for important offices. But then there's this other side that we're just so, beaten down. So how do you translate that? How do we get the people that are listening now, watching us on these different platforms, how do we get them out to the polls?
Okay. Well, there's a couple levels. First of all, the idea of learned helplessness is what we're dealing with. And in other words, you get beat down for so long, you finally say, well, gee, that's it. When it comes to the work I'm doing, and I have a couple of books that are, one coming out pretty recently.
Exciting. I looked at it briefly, and
then I've got the other one in the works right now is called After Ideology, Your Handy Realignment Guide. And the idea is realignment is what's happening right now. The tide of history is behind us. And
us being conservative Christian Judeo values.
Yeah.
Right.
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to, conservatives getting a spine is one of those things that I wrote about a little while ago, and it still applies. So
well, explain that.
Okay. If you laugh at the propaganda, you're doing what we did in World War II, or 1776, or Civil War, or with Teddy Roosevelt. At some point, the bad guys, even though they control the levers of power and media, people just stop believing. Like in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union didn't fall apart because somebody from the outside did it. People just said, heck, we're not doing it. So that's what's happening in California. To the extent that it's happening later than in other states doesn't mean it's not happening. So you have to look at realignment. What I'm working on is looking at the realignment and looking at the structure of it and saying, gee whiz, we win. Now, when it comes to Christians, I think bucking up your Christian fundamentals is what I wanted to talk about today principally.
Well, let's do it.
There's a couple of books that, if you look at your material, recently I rediscovered Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict. So
I remember when that came out. It was so inspiring.
Yeah, and it got thicker. So now, I brought a copy, but that thing is, his son and him re-upped it, and that the target for this elite group is Christians and Jews. In other words, the idea of totalitarian government is you take away people's values and just make them dependent. Well, getting a spine means understanding your Christian values. So there's 4 books that I brought. First of all, McDowell, he basically nails it. I mean, when it looks to everything that the bad guys can say, he basically has an answer for. C.S. Lewis's book Miracles is kind of a deceptive title, but it basically lays out the case for naturalism or reductionism, which is what the atheists believe in.
Right.
And in favor of supernaturalism, which is what modern physics says, higher dimensional,
right.
No big deal with modern physics. So Miracles, McDowell, there's a book called Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes by Bailey, which gives you the cultural context that the disciples and Jesus lived in. So if you want to really dial in your understanding of Jesus, that's a great book.
Now, Bailey is you, right?
No, Kenneth Bailey.
Kenneth Bailey.
He grew up in the Middle East, and he's written a whole bunch of books. You can also, the easy way is to just listen to him on YouTube. The 4th one that I think is worth looking at is The Triumph of Christianity, How a Forbidden Religion Swept the World, and that one is by Ehrman. So the point is, there's a whole bunch of other books that I was looking at, but I think you have to start with your Christian values and understanding that the 19th and 20th centuries were when nihilists saying, science says, and then they sold some kind of voodoo.
Yeah,
so
right.
the point is, right now we have science saying is 100% behind what we consider Christian values, and these guys are the ones that can help Christians translate their beliefs into politics.
But let's go down the list because people need they need information. They need credible information that answers these questions that we're all trying to deal with. So Josh McDowell, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, that book came out in the 70s, and it just keeps getting better.
The updated version is wonderful. It weighs enough to do damage if you try to pick it up. It's got real thick. But what you do is you don't read the thing from cover to cover. You look at the index and say,
right.
gee,
just go down.
What are my issues?
Yeah. So Josh McDowell, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, check it out. Look it up. Go on to YouTube. And it gives you and reinforces the values that we are believing in and that we are standing for, and that we're getting really a lot of opposition because of those values. Because what's the word you said? I just love that word. The reductionists.
Yeah, naturalists and reductionists. In other words, determinists basically said that science says we don't have free will, we don't have, we don't have a choice. But my background is scientific, and I did engineering at UC Berkeley. The point is, when it comes to modern physics, the whole idea of even, to understand our world, you have to understand higher dimensional, mathematics. So that is the reason that this whole materialism is 19th century thinking. So if you wanted, the Christians are in the 21st century as well as being in the, 3,000 years ago. We are the current wave of the future. What failed was, if you read C.S. Lewis's book, is
Miracles.
He makes a case against naturalism, which it's kind of a deceptive title because it's not really about miracles. It's about how God, who's hanging out at a higher dimension, can do what he wants in this dimension.
But that really is the point, isn't it? God is God. He doesn't need our help. He doesn't need our permission. He doesn't need our approval. He's God. He kind of does what he wants, and we have to believe in him, or you're stuck with faulty science and reductionism. But Tucker had a speech a couple of years ago on the reduction. Now that I see that term the way you're using it, how we went from the Enlightenment of the Greek, Roman, prosperity and advancement into the Dark Ages.
Yes.
So that would be an example of reductionism, right?
Well, I mean, people did. Isaac Newton he could only handle simple problems. So we live in a complex world where, people, networks of things don't behave in a deterministic manner. In other words, your brain is, you emerge out of simple parts, and it works for almost everything in the world. In other words, simple parts working together create miracles. You are a miracle. Your existence is a miracle. A tree is a miracle. A baby is a miracle. So the point is, those are all things that deterministic science tried to explain away, and in order to do that, they went crazy. In other words, they're saying crazy stuff because they didn't have the tools that we have now to understand how communities and assemblies of things work. They didn't have simulation. They didn't have the tools that we have now. Newton understood his limitations, and so he did the best he could. And so what happened was people excluded all of that complex, non-deterministic, all those phenomena from what we called science, and so science ended up in this sort of a desert.
And it's a lot of guesswork. I mean, science is guesswork.
Well, I mean, if you can do it with a formula, fine, but that means that everything outside the laboratory is outside of traditional
Reality.
science. But currently in the 21st century, we can do simulations, we can do all sorts of things which help to explain how the complex world works. But we also understand that complex things don't aren't machines. You get this thing called emergence, which means that unexpected things happen when people group together or things group together. So emergence is the area where everyday miracles become part of scientific reality.
But that's one of the reasons we can have confidence in God.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons we can feel secure, because what is demonstrated in nature exposes the complexity and the supremacy of God
We have 3,000 years of
that
scripture.
we can rely on.
Yes.
We can rely on
Yes.
those facts of science that say things are going to work a certain way because of the complexity of God.
Science is a limited tool, but we
Right.
have 3,000 years of God talking to us through the Bible and Scripture, and we can rely on that.
Including the values. Those
Yes.
values are there because if you want to harm yourself and damage yourself, then ignore them. And then you're going to have some adverse reaction. But, get into what you're trying to say. Things are changing in California.
Yes.
And you're explaining in a really profound way, I'm just amazed, that the change has to do with how God has ordered the universe, how he's ordered our existence, how he created us and gave us all the complexities of our mind and function and emotions and all of those features that we received when God created us that way. He purposefully made us to operate, and that can be depended upon because God's reliable.
Yes. So the thing is, this is a reset. We've and if you think about it, your brain has more horsepower than any computer that was ever invented.
Right.
I mean, every child has got more computing power than any conceivable computer. So
Now, that's
and
hard
then-
to grasp.
well,
I mean,
but the point is, what we have, the tools we have, are amazing, and the bad guys don't have those tools. They are limited in their ability to think about the world, and we're not. So we have an advantage.
Now, let's try and apply that to this coming election coming up. All you see on the news is doom and gloom, all this false reporting, false information, distorted information, and it kind of beats us down. And really, that's the objective, right? They're trying to destroy our will to pursue our values and what we believe in what we're trying to do. So you're saying that, look, there's reason for optimism. There's reason to be confident. There's reason to get out there and vote, because if you're not motivated, if you're discouraged and depressed, it's like, oh, what the heck? No use even voting.
So if you want to stay inside the bubble that's controlled by the bad guys, you're going to take hits. So the reason I'm doing the daily update is to give people information that's useful and it's outside the bubble. And I'm a big fan of Psalm 1, which says, "Walk not in the way of sinners," and that kind of thing. In other words, what you plug into is where you end up. So I'm telling, when it comes to Christians, currently all of the bad guy news outlets are failing, and the ones that tell people useful information, they're doing well.
So it says, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly,
They're standing.
nor stand in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful.
Right.
But his delight is in the law of the Lord.
And in his law,
Will he meditate day and night? So that's a form of programming, right?
it's it has to do with the structure of complex systems. In other words, if you plug yourself into something that is healthy, you end up with good results. That's what that Psalm 1 says. If you want to play baseball, you don't hang out with a soccer team. So if you want to basically win elections, you plug yourself into information sources that will give you good information rather than filling your head with triggers.
Well, let's talk about your books, because the one book is getting ready to come off the press, right? And that is a very, very inspiring book.
Well, the idea is to basically take a look at the progressive narrative that we've lived with, which is that a certain group of elites bring enlightenment to the natives. And so in this case, that narrative is breaking down. I mean,
Well, your cover conveys that. I mean, this is a very moving. I'm a graphic designer. I know graphics, and this is so well done. I just love the look of it. I like the feel of it. It's got that whole, Africana thing feel to it. It's called Into the Light. And tell us what the book is about.
Well, it's about the narrative. In other words, it's Africa is the example. In other words, right now, James Baldwin, for instance, said there are no black people in the world except in America. If you go to Africa, people are, Zulu or Bantu. They have culture.
Right.
And so I happen to be Irish. I have culture. I know my history, but for some reason, well, because of progressive narratives, people from that region of the world have been deprived of their actual history, and their actual history is amazing. I mean, one of the richest regions in the world was Northwest Africa. They had
What year?
up to about 1600.
Okay. So
And 1600, there was a battle. They
what
lost
would
the battle.
what would the earliest history be? That
They had 1,000-year urban history.
Okay.
They had thriving metropolis, direct to linear streets. They were the richest person that ever lived came from that area.
What year?
In about 1400.
So
they had one of-
1400. That's
had one of the biggest when Shakespeare was
Galileo
around.
stuff,
These
right?
guys had one of the biggest universities in the world. They were a book production
In
center,
Africa.
Northwest Africa. They had like a 2 million volume library in Northwest Africa, of which maybe 700,000 volumes have been preserved by local residents. The people who came to America during the slave period, after that one battle of Tondibi in 1580, their whole political system collapsed, and the existing slave market, which originally went to Arabia, European corporations showed up on the coast with boats, and they just said, "Oh, we got a new market for slaves." And people who came to America from like maybe 10 or 12 million from that area of the world could have been business people, college professors. It was not the kind of
Wasn't in
narrative.
the jungle, primitive
Yes.
living,
So
and
the narrative the Tarzan and Jane narrative, the progressive narrative that said that Europeans brought progress to these savages all over the world, that's what's breaking down right now. In other words,
that's interesting.
and so it's the narrative that's really the subject matter of this book. And it's not just Africa, but Central America had amazing civilization, Mexico, amazing civilization. Amazon Basin had a really advanced, you see huge causeways if you look in LiDAR.
Mm-hmm.
So the point is, the progressive narrative is no longer marketable.
Which is this: you are what I tell you you are.
Yes, and so that is what you can keep a thing like that going for a while, but in around 2010, you started seeing books and documentaries which poked holes in that narrative. This book is just basically pointing to it's an 80-page book, and it points to all the 700-page books that say the narrative is over.
So Into the Light, it's almost ready for press? Where's it at? When can people expect to get it?
Well, I got a call from the editor saying, keep an eye out for it, and that was 2 weeks ago. So
Okay.
it should be showing up pretty quick. And then we have
How long did it take you to write it?
It was pretty quick. I mean, it took like 6 months, but that it's part of it was one chapter of another book on the structure of American corporations, which tends to produce, concentrations of wealth that we've never seen in the history of the world. In other words, American corporations are peculiar items, and I don't want to go into the whole premise of the book, but initially the founders said we don't want to live under corporate rule because initially American colonies were run from boardrooms in London.
Yeah, right.
And so initially the founders really didn't like corporations in a big way. We didn't see corporations in America until the 1850s when they finally
Standard
created
Oil.
Delaware and a bunch of states created corporation laws. But the point is, this chapter was one of the chapters, and I turned it into this.
What's the
booklet.
message in your mind? What are you trying to make people understand?
To celebrate their history. In other words, we should celebrate our cultures rather than having these victim narratives.
But we have a Black History celebration once a year, and everybody celebrates Black History in America. It's kind of a token thing. I mean, it's almost offensive.
Calling people by a color. I mean, there was one individual that's been coming to your events that said, if you have to call people by a color, you're a racist. So the idea,
true.
the James Baldwin quote said that the only place people are black or white is in America. And that starts with Stephen Douglas and the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Lincoln is saying, I'm going to lift people up. Douglas said, white people rule. So that whole white-black thing is a 19th century invention. In other words, calling people green or yellow.
Yellow, yeah.
Yellow, red,
right.
white. That color system came up in the 19th century, and it's breaking down. I mean, Morgan Freeman said in an interview with Mike Wallace, I don't want you to call me a color. That's the way you're going to, if you want to fix racism.
But they're doing that right now with the white
they're trying to hang
privilege
on to that,
and
that's the book.
Yeah.
Into the Light, it says that is broken down.
right.
It's not marketable. So the idea of celebrating this wonderful, rich, urban African history is a way of stepping outside of the bubble, the progressive bubble, that attempts to classify us in ways that creates a forever war.
Right.
You create classifications, and cultural Marxists say, well, gee, we're gonna keep people fighting each other forever, and then while they're fighting, we're just gonna take over.
Well, we're trying to get ahead of all that. We're trying to get beyond that whole manipulation thing, that it's racial, the racial component, but then there's the other component of being anti-earth, being, they make up this stuff.
Yes. And so the point is, this Abraham Lincoln and Marx were sort of contemporaries. Guess who won?
Lincoln.
Abraham, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Right.
Marx is persona non grata. Lincoln, everybody still loves him.
Right,
And his idea was lifting people up.
right.
And that's what the realignment message is. You move from victim narratives to celebrating everybody's culture, everybody's abilities. And a lot of, like in Europe, people who are working people are valued. Here, they are commodities. And that is the difference.
We make the
difference.
commodity for them. In other words, we create the commodity that they consume.
Well, I mean, people are commodities.
That's what I'm saying. We make those people into what we want them to be. Or not
Yes.
we, it's them.
So the idea is valuing every individual and celebrating every individual's culture and having, in other words, the idea of this whole cultural Marxism woke thing, it's hit a wall.
Now, the
Nobody goes
feminist
for
thing
it.
would be the same, right? That would just spill over to
So
say,
guess how that worked out?
How?
I mean,
yeah, look,
so standard feminists, like for instance,
Gloria Steinem and
so there's an article that was in the Daily Update for this morning that said Title IX is dead because males are being allowed to win, all sorts of sporting events. So the point is, this whole progressive narrative it keeps going. It has to keep finding new victim groups. So now biological
Exactly.
women
Exactly.
are, trans exclusionary radical feminism, TERF, is considered to be a bad word among progressives. So progressives have abandoned women, they've abandoned children, they mutilate children, and call it, some kind of, victim group. So the point is, we have such absurdities.
they're going to help us not be a victim by castrating.
Yes. So the point is, the absurdity of what progressives have ended up in the 21st century means they don't have a future. So the regular folks that just want good schools, faith, family, freedom, that kind of a message resonates with everybody. And people in downtown Detroit, people in downtown Omaha, you name it, people are saying, we want a future for our kids. We want jobs, we want safe streets, we want a clean environment. We're not going to go for the woke narratives.
So what does your next book that you're working on, how does that tie in? And what
Well,
is it? Tell us about it.
So I've got the End of the Light is going to be out in a couple days. The next one is Corporate Democracy in America, and that's pretty much ready to go. The third one, which I'm working on right now, is called After Ideology, which says it's the realignment guide, and that's the one that says Marx, Lincoln, yay. So it's really the idea of looking at the world in a 21st century way is good for Christians, not good for this failing elite. The failing elites are, you can see them, they're like fish sitting on the counter flopping around, but they don't have a future.
But they expose themselves. Look at Zuckerberg and this whole, and Gates and all these people. They have to almost they have to put a cloak around their wealth even, because they can't be seen as being too wealthy, and they don't want to reveal what, in Hawaii, Zuckerberg is doing this whole big project down there. But my point is, you're saying that they're the ones that are losing, we're the ones that are winning. That's hard to grasp.
Okay, 1776, guess who had all the power? The oligarchs in London.
Right.
Guess who won? Teddy Roosevelt. You had the robber barons.
That was serious.
Okay,
that was
so-
really
so
serious.
Teddy Roosevelt was a Donald Trump. He had he would bring diplomats and take them downstairs at the White House and have boxing matches with them just as a bonding exercise. So so the point is he basically, guess who won on that one? They basically, the oligarchs got dumped. In World War II, they were on good behavior for a while. Starting in the 1970s, you had this new group, the Davos guys, that said, well, we're just going to go back to business as usual and take over. And what happened in 2008 and following is, and then especially 2014 when David Bratt beat Eric Cantor, who was the corporate guy, and then Donald Trump won, and then since then you've had all these other Donald Trumps all over the world winning. So the point is, the good guys are dumping the bad guys just like they have every other time.
So we have something to be confident about. We have something that is saying to us that there is an alignment taking place that's moving us away from that into what?
Well, this is just the American Revolution round three.
Right.
So I mean, there's the one I've been looking at recently is Thomas Paine's statement. These are the times that try men's souls, and so it says in this crisis, summer soldiers and sunshine patriots will shrink from their service to their country. So this is the time Thomas Paine's message in 1776 applies to 2024.
Now, there seems to be, okay, so in order to succeed, we have to win at the polls. We have to get people awake, motivated, inspired, and they have to go to the polls. If we don't go to the polls, then we're forever slaves.
Well, you have to have a message. It comes message and motivation and movement go together.
Yeah,
So the
I'm trying
point
to
is,
find the message here
the
today
message
because
is
that's really
realignment is the
inspiring.
message. Realignment's the message. Getting a spine is the message. Bucking up your Christianity is the message. So the point is, when it comes to Americans, we know what to do with crooks, and we basically after
Let them go and give
You
them
say
some,
yeah.
some taxi money.
you say enough, and we said enough in 1776 and 1900, in 1940,
I
and
like
with
that.
Ronald Reagan, 1980, we said enough, and we did in 2016. So this is not something Americans know how to do this. We're good at it.
Do you know what just occurred to me as you're saying that? Because I'm looking for something to grab onto.
Okay.
Barack Obama, the great fraud of all times, I think, when he was running, he chose the slogan. What was that slogan?
I forget.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
That was the slogan. Yes, we can.
Okay.
Are we going to win at the election? Yes, we can. That's what you're saying today. That's the message that you're putting out there, that the realignment issue really is that message. Yes, we can. So stop falling back into the trap of being a victim, being defeated, no hope, no options, because the message really is, yes, we can. We have to steal it back from Obama.
Well, sure. I mean, in other words, he was good at wordsmithing, and he
Community
basically
organizer.
he took
He was the best.
put lipstick on the pig like crazy. So what we can do, we just have to say no big deal. We've done this 1776 and all those other times. This is just the latest round. We're Americans. We're American revolutionaries, and we know what to do. We're going to get in there and fix the problem. Looking at drinking the bad guy's Kool-Aid has not been good for us.
Well, Richard, what you're telling us this morning and this evening is that we have reason to hope. We have reason to be optimistic. We're not self-deceiving here. There's hope. And this program just flew by. We're down to less than 3 minutes in the show, and there's so much more to talk about. But first of all, I'd love for people to follow your advice. So why don't you look into the camera and talk to the people that are watching us and listening to us and telling them we've got 3 powerful books. There's your 2 books. All this information is giving us the hope that, yes, we can. We can overcome this thing, but we have to get off our couch. We have to get out the door. We have to take responsibility. Just tell them what you think and how they can be inspired.
Well, take your faith seriously. You can show up and have some lifestyle, religion, or you can take it seriously and follow what Thomas Paine said. Get out there and serve. And serving the Lord means serving your community. And you can't serve your community when you're sitting there, huddling in the basement. So we have to be bold. You have to, do everything in a scriptural way. but do it.
Well, again, I want to just thank you for all this hard work. We've been working together for about 4 years now, and I think I told you a couple of times. I said I'm not quite getting some of this, but I know what you're saying is the answer. I know there's truth and reality in what you're saying. Oh, President Trump, I'm sorry. I'm on the radio right now. I can't take the call.
It was really Barack.
But I'm learning. I'm getting it. I'm beginning to understand. But that's really our hope and what you're giving us. So Terry, turn off your phone. Thank you. I will. We have the solutions. That's the point. We can do this. We have the solutions. Get that book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, Miracles by C.S. Lewis. Get the book Into the Light by W.R. Bailey. Our guy right here, Richard Bailey. I can't wait to read that book. And I think that it's inspiring to just listen to you and tell us this stuff. So we have to schedule the next show with Richard Bailey as soon as possible. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for tuning in and listening and watching. God bless you.
God bless.
Thank my lucky stars to be living here today. Cause the flag still stands for freedom,
Anyway,
and
thanks.
they
Good job.
can't take
Thank you.
that away.
Going on across our state and some of the keen insights that you have. So welcome to the show. Say hi.
I'm always glad to be with you, Terry.
And Ellington, why don't you just say hi to people and let them know that.
It's great to come back and talk about liberty.
Well, it really is about liberty. And, you know, Steve, you're on the front lines of so many things, and we're trying to recapture our state. We're trying to recapture our Constitution, our freedoms. I mean, good grief. We have experienced some really incredible changes that have taken place, and there's this whole new thing going on that's hard to describe in my mind. How would you describe it, Steve? What's going on?
We are in the midst of a civil war in California and in the United States, and that civil war takes place on the streets, with the crime, with the drugs, with the illegal aliens, with the homeless. It takes place in the halls of justice, where the district attorneys are not doing their job and the police are too afraid to do their job for fear their financial future will be destroyed. It's taking place in the churches, where churches are being told to shut up and not preach the gospel, and in the halls of academia, where kids are being taught from the kindergarten on, Marxism is good and freedom is bad. So we are in the midst of a civil war. And the problem is, Terry, is that it's a one-sided war. The other side is fighting, and the rest of us are just listening.
Exactly right. Yeah. Well, I won't say what that sounds like to me because we're on the radio, but it really is. You know, Ellington, how did you? Do you agree with what Steve just said?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you get closer?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, I think the world stage of where the United States has reflected what's happening in the Civil War. It's part of bringing down the United States as a world power. And it's happening, and it's creating a lot of chaos and keeping division, and people can't unite over what's right and wrong anymore. Everything is arbitrary. People are not held accountable for their actions. There's so much cover-up going on within the government right now that they are speaking with forked tongue. I just saw where the United States has released Russian assets to Estonia, and yet we're supposed to be in conflict with Russia. But in reality, the elites bypassed the sanctions, and they released these Russian assets to Estonia. And so it's hard to tell what is true anymore, what is real, what our government is really up to, because there's a lot of behind-the-scenes activity going on. And the public is just held in chaos.
Well, you know, we had a guest on yesterday that described what's going on in terms of a realignment. And the realignment is the fact that people are saying, I've had enough, and we're going to do something about it. We're going to confront this. But it's happening all over the world. Italy and Germany and the whole progressive people are losing influence, and people are stepping up. What are we doing in America, Steve? Are we realigning? How's our realignment looking?
Well, actually, there is a realignment, and we see it on the nightly news when we see the people of Harlem denouncing the illegal aliens, denouncing the Democrat mayor of New York, and denouncing Joe Biden. We see it in Michigan, where the Muslim community is saying, we don't want Joe Biden anymore. And the leading congresswoman Tlaib has said to the Democrats of Michigan, vote no commitment for instead of Joe Biden on the Michigan primary, which is in a couple of weeks. And so we're beginning to see throughout the country, whether it be Chicago or San Francisco, that people are beginning to step up and say, we've had enough. We're not going to take it anymore.
How do we harness that? How do we, we're in a civil war, so we have to fight unless we're just going to give up. So what does fighting look like to you, Ellington?
I think it's coming against district attorneys that are very liberal and actually implementing law from the bench rather than fighting constitutional law. And I think we need to draw closer to the Constitution. There's nothing that has been discussed that isn't covered in the Constitution, but we're just not upholding the laws of the Constitution. And we got to get stronger.
But that's the fight. That's really the fight right there.
Yeah, and we got to get stronger DAs in that are constitutionalists. And I see that as one of the major things. The other one is this whole area of misinformation, which is actually one of the elements of warfare, is to provide disinformation and get a hold of really what is true. And that's a big, big area, especially with artificial intelligence coming in. And things being created, and people don't read anymore. They just read headline news, and they don't really grasp some of the depth of what's happening. And we got to get a hold of that. The young people are just totally lost. They have no concept of what's going on in the world or really in their neighborhood from a government control point of view.
Well, what Richard Bailey said in our interview about realignment is that we have to embrace and make this realignment and support it and encourage it, and that people want it. So we're in the Civil War. We're trying to fight back. We need some tools. And as he was talking, Steve, and how this is positive and we should be encouraged, all of a sudden, Barack Obama appeared in my mind. He was standing there, and what do you think his slogan was during his campaign? Do you remember what his slogan was?
No,
Remake
I
America.
don't.
I'll tell you what it was. It should be our slogan now. Yes, we can. And he said, are we going to have this problem or that problem? We're going to solve it. Yes, we can. And that's really the message of realignment. That's really what we're trying to get people to accept and act on. Yes, we can. We can change this doggone state. And it's hard for me to get myself personally to the point where I can actually believe that we can flip California. And it's been growing on me for several months, really. But I'm convinced we can, but I've been kind of afraid to say it. What do you think, Steve?
Well, I think we make a mistake when we try to push people into the realignment. Instead of doing that, what I believe we should be doing is educating them as to how the current system is destroying them, how the current system has taken advantage of them, how the Democrats and the progressives don't care about them. They just care about power for themselves, which is an example of what's going on in New York and Chicago with community centers, schools being closed, public facilities being closed. I teach these people that government is the enemy, not the Republicans. It's government that is the enemy.
The progressive elites.
Remind them that everything bad in their life is due to government action. Failed schools, government. Crime, government. Illegal aliens closing down community centers, government. And so we need to remind them that, and they will come across once they get it into their fiber that this is what's wrong. It's government. Government is the enemy of the people.
You know, that's exactly what Richard Bailey said, was that it's organic. It's just coming up in people. And he recommended a couple of books, but basically he said that we have to embrace our values, stand for our values, don't be afraid of our values. And so he recommended the book Evidence That Demands a Verdict by McDowell, Miracles by C.S. Lewis, which had nothing to do with real miracles. It was talking about the transformation and realignment. So it's education, it's finding out what's really true and what isn't true. And then where do we go from there, Ellington?
Well, I think the major problem that I see, I agree with the education and getting the realignment, but when I look at the timing aspect, the timing for re-educating people takes years. It's not an overnight situation. We need an overnight cure of our media producing honest valuations. We need a moral code, morality to be lifted up in a higher plane so people know the right from wrong, especially young people. But I see the major problem with that as being the timing of it all. I think we're behind in timing, and I agree the education is needed. People need to understand what's behind it. But when I look at the timelines, that's what I worry about. I don't see these things happening quick enough to respond to what the United Nations is doing.
The whole economic
all of this
manipulations.
area. And there's so much going on in different areas that the average citizen can't keep track of it. The economic impact, the World Health Organization. People don't realize that the virus, COVID virus, killed 7 million people worldwide.
And we have that data. That's
Right,
reliable.
Right, and the other thing is there's just a new study that came out last week. I think it came from Denmark, from an outfit called Global Vaccine Network Data Center, and it was funded by the CDC, Center for Disease Control. $10 million was contributed. They looked at 90 million cases of COVID vaccinated people, and they found that there's neurological damage.
Heart.
It's all listed. People need to watch out for this report because it brings home what a lot of people thought was happening with the vaccine. It brings it into reality. The inflammation of the heart. There's a list of about 17 items that the vaccine has caused. And the fact that it's killed the COVID killed 7 million people. The other thing is the World Health Organization just announced that there's a 77% increase in cancer coming up.
77%
increase in cancer, primarily with young people. Now, there was a study going on, there was a study going on relating to using the spike protein for cancer treatment. And through that advancement, they discovered that there's been a real spike in cancer amongst younger people.
Mm-hmm.
And so these things aren't being let out by the news media. People are not being made aware of the damage. And the United States, with Fauci, was behind the Wuhan lab. So there's all of this behind the scenes stuff, and we're just now seeing a lot of the facts come to surface. So,
well, it is a problem, and we have to get in a position to deal with it. And how do you see that, Steve? Say across our state, And here in the Central Valley, there's things going on that I think are hopeful and encouraging. But the one thing that has to happen, historically, people just don't turn out for primary elections. Republicans, they stay at home. How do we change that, Steve?
Well, as of today, as you know, the ballots went out a couple of weeks ago. As of today, only 24% of the ballots that have been returned are that of Republicans.
Right.
And so the Republicans just haven't voted yet. But that being said, only 3% of all of the total ballots have been returned. So almost nobody is voting in this election. And it would not be surprising to me that we're going to have a very, very low voter turnout election on March 5th, because if you watch TV, you see the ads for the Senate candidates, but you don't see much else. There are no ballot measures. There's no energy for this election. Everybody knows Trump is going to be the nominee for the Republicans, that Biden will be the nominee for the Democrats, that Schiff is going to be winning the Senate seat. So why do we have to go out to vote? It's already over and done with. And you'll see a bigger turnout in November, but right now it's a very small group of people that have voted or will vote.
I think some of that is going to change when Biden gets to the DNC. I think he's going to back out, and it'll be Newsom. And those delegates will go over to Newsom for the DNC. That's just my take on what's getting ready to happen. When that happens, I think you'll see a boost in Democrat involvement in the voting process, especially here in California. And I have put money on the line on this, so I'm very, very much convinced that Biden's going to step out of it. I don't see any way that he can get reelected.
How many ways can you prop him up? I mean, this guy should be embalmed.
Well, let's give Biden some credit here.
Okay.
He's the only president that we've had that has actually talked to the dead. So we got to give him credit for at least that.
That's for sure. But I'll disagree with you. If I was praying for this, I would pray that Gavin Newsom is the Democrat nominee, because Gavin Newsom is going to have to defend California, and California is such a disaster to the rest of the nation.
Dismal.
And a lot of states have taken California legislation like EV mandates, lack of and other environmental issues, and put it into their states. People are hurting all over the country because of California. You talk about California, we have 1/3 of the people who are in poverty in the whole nation. We have over
Really?
1/3 of the
Yes,
people who are
yeah.
homeless in the
Oh
whole
my
nation.
gosh.
Those are good points, very good points.
And
yeah.
so if I had my wish, and I do believe you're correct, I do believe it's quite possible that for one reason or another, Biden will not be able to run for president, whether it's because of his lack of he'll ask the question on TV, what's president?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
he doesn't know what town he's in.
Yeah,
He doesn't know who
exactly.
he's shaking hands with, and he doesn't know how to get out off the podium.
Well, give us some names. So Gavin Newsom's the obvious one. What are some other possibilities, do you think,
Well,
Steve?
There are two other people who are running. One is the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer,
Oh, gee.
and then you have the governor of Illinois, Pritzker.
And then you have Kennedy,
and,
right?
And just to give you an idea about what Pritzker looks like, he makes Chris Christie look thin.
What are your names? Do you have anyone other than Newsom in mind? I could.
No, he's the only one I see that has been groomed through the Pelosi and the Feinstein
Machine
power, and he's been groomed for this, and that's where the push is going to come, and that's why I think he's probably going to take the nomination. He'll be drafted in.
Wow.
And I agree with the points about California, but the Democrats have a way of uniting and pulling the nation together under very liberal causes. And I don't want to underestimate what they will do with their messages relative to Newsom being president. And I agree with all of the things you said about how bad things are here in California, but the rest of the nation, people look at it differently on environmental issues depending on where you are. And so I think some of the good things that are happening is a backlash on electric vehicles, the backlash on the CDC and World Health Organization. These are all good movements, and we're seeing it
Right.
form in a way that is becoming a political force. But California, the way the Democrats groom things, I think we still have this power to deal with. And
Well, let's talk about Trump a little bit because this guy is amazing. I mean, it's just mind-boggling how he's been able to stay on his feet and operate and move forward, but it just seems to be natural to him. And
he's starting to look older than me.
yeah, he's starting to show some signs. But Steve, Trump has really held in there, and he's getting momentum. And I think he's offering hope and solutions. How do you rate him? How do you handicap him?
Well, earlier in the show, we talked about the transformation of voters. And what Trump has been doing, and very successfully, he has shown the black community and the Hispanic community that the justice system is rigged against them. And he is a prime example of how you rig a justice system against a private citizen.
He is
All
a poster
these
boy.
indictments and lawsuits, et cetera, et cetera. And he's made the case to those communities that we need justice reform, and we can't have it under the current administration or under the Democrats, because it's the Democrats who have run the justice system. Remember, who had the most people jailed and imprisoned in the state of California for the use of marijuana? It was Attorney General Kamala Harris.
Exactly.
That's a good point. Very
Yeah.
good point.
So when you look at the justice system being used against people, that's what the Democrats have done for years. And now Trump is, because of his situation, he's been able to prove to them that he is, again, he won in 2016 because he was looked upon, even though he's a billionaire, as a working class person. Now, because of the justice system abuses by the Democrats, again, he appears to be a working class lunch bucket person.
That just happens to have a few $1 billion hanging around.
Well, that's true too.
But Trump has the momentum. I mean, this is just hard work, grind, and total commitment. But here's the thing that I think is making him succeed. I really believe Trump. I believe his love for America. I believe his love for justice. I believe his love for equality and racial equality. I think he is blind racially. And I think those qualities come through and those values resonate. But how do we get that beyond Trump? How do we get the Republicans, and especially in California, to stand up and do something and get off the couch and get out there and vote?
I think one of the things we need to do is put together a list of all the positive things that happened under Trump's administration.
That's right. He has a track record.
And bring that out. You know, we didn't have the illegal immigration problem. We didn't have.
We were drilling oil. We were energy independent.
His problem was that he had to rely on other people on the COVID situation, and that really isn't Trump's fault. He's not a doctor, and he had to rely on other people's input. And I think that tarnished it a bit. But if you look at the overall position of Black America and Hispanic America, the employment was all up under Trump.
Right.
And we need to bring those to the surface and promote the well-being of the American people under Trump administration.
Well, let's bring this down to Fresno County and the Central Valley. Do we have, in your opinion, Steve, candidates that can win out there?
Well, there's a difference between winning and making a difference. Yes, you have candidates that are going to win, but that doesn't mean that they're going to make a difference. And the best example for me is the race to replace Kevin McCarthy for Congress. Vince Vaughn is one of the nicest people I know. He is a gentle individual who's very bright, and but he's a backbencher. He is not a leader. He is not aggressive. He is not somebody that really represents. He holds office, and he smiles nice and shows up at the right places. And he's the type of person that's been elected year after year in the Central Valley.
Right.
You need to have people who are going to be leaders rather than just holding office.
How about a sheriff?
Well, I'm not going to say it's Boudreaux. I've not endorsed in that race, but I will tell you that the machine out of Kern County has held down the Republican Party for decades. First, it was under Bill Thomas, then it was under Kevin McCarthy, and they continue to hold down the Republican Party from being leaders. McCarthy was an individual leader. He didn't want any other leaders. Bill Thomas before him, and McCarthy worked for Thomas. Thomas didn't want any other leaders to challenge him, so he kept him down. They had nice people run for office, and that was it. Not people who knew what they were doing or were aggressive on behalf of their constituents. And that's the real problem. Leadership.
So who do we want? There's Boudreaux, and there's 12 people running for that seat. But what's your take on who we should be supporting? Because this is going to happen like right now.
I know, and I've not endorsed anybody, but certainly I've met the Tulare sheriff, Mike Boudreaux, many times in the past. I've done a lot of work in the Central Valley, and he is a leader.
He is a leader.
He's willing to speak up. I remember during the COVID situation, he said, my sheriffs are going to do their job. They're not going to hide in their cars or in their homes. And they did their jobs.
Nice.
Which is the responsibility. And he took on the state of California. And so that's leadership.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we love him here, Liberty Coalition and the people in Clovis that I'm working with. They just love him to pieces. They're supporting him. And because I think the very reasons you're telling us, he's a leader. He's doing something. But he also has some pretty darn good ideas, solutions. I mean, he isn't just talking, vote for me. I'm a conservative. I believe the way you believe, so therefore you should vote for me. He has solutions. He has energy solutions. He has water solutions. He has all these different plans that, you can look at it and decide if you think it's reasonable, but at least he has solutions. That's the way I see him. What do you think, Ellington? Do you know him? Anything about him?
Well, I've been listening to his counterparts ad on the air and on TV.
Oh, that's
and
unfortunate.
the thing that hits me when you get somebody, I've listened to Mike several times now, and I support him. But when you listen to the opposition, basically bringing up lies
Why would
about
they
him,
do that?
well, the lies about him, people need to understand. If you are electing somebody that lies so much, and they get into office, what are they going to do in office?
Good point.
And the one opposition, the ads have been very, very negative against the sheriff, and
Well, he's definitely
those
not
need to
open
bring-
borders, so I mean that is
Yeah.
preposterous.
Yeah, and those things need to come to surface because people who lie like that, if they get into office, they're going to lie in office and be opposite of what you think they are.
Well, the lie that you're talking about is that he's liberal, he's an
Yes.
open border, that he isn't for, he's for amnesty. So his response has been, because he's come out, he's given us a text and he's faced it and dealt with it. His response is this: I'm a law and order candidate. I stand for law and order. And if you think that I'm open borders and amnesty, how could I possibly get the endorsement of every sheriff in the state of California and every law enforcement entity in the Central Valley? So that is good enough for me.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't know that.
They don't know that.
They're hearing this one ad that's one way and counter that. And
Now that ad, by the way,
I would attack it directly with a lying candidate.
but the candidate he's dodging it. Steve, I think there's a PAC that's putting that material out. It isn't directly from Fong's campaign that I know of, but I have traced the PAC is out of Las Vegas, and the people that are running that PAC are just basically for hire. You can hire them for your campaign, and they'll advocate for you if you pay them. So that's where that came from. But what do you think of that whole thing, Steve?
Well, the idea that you want to misrepresent Sheriff Boudreaux's positions on issues shows what lack of leadership Fong has.
Exactly.
Instead of saying, these are the great things I'm going to do for you, I'm going to tell you, give you misinformation about one of my opponents, so vote against them. And hopefully you'll vote for me. And this is the same guy, Vince Fong, that has decided that the rules of elections don't mean anything to him. He's literally running for 2 offices at the same time, state assembly and for Congress. And eventually we'll know by April 10th when the courts rule, and April 10th is the day that the votes have to be certified for the March 5th primary. And so we'll know by then whether you're legally allowed to break the law and run for 2 offices at the same time.
Oh,
Wow.
That's good point, Steve.
Yeah, that is a great point. Well, let's look at the Michael Maher and Jim Costa. This guy, Jim Costa, knows how to stay on his feet. I mean, he's he's homesteaded that district now for a long time, and Michael came close the last election. But where do you see that race, Steve?
It's not Costa that's going to win the election. It's the Democrats. Here's the problem we have for November. You're going to have a presidential race, regardless of the Democrat. The Democrats are energized in California to elect the Democrat nominee.
Not to mention they're well financed.
Well financed.
They have all the money in the world.
Well, not only do they have all the money in the world, they have all the, and I'll put quotes around the word, volunteers in the world, because union members are forced, they're extorted into walking precincts for Democrats. So you have that.
Wow.
Then you have
Yeah,
Schiff running for the U.S. Senate.
Oh boy.
Then what you have, the Democrats have pushed a whole bunch of ballot measures on the November ballot that are going to be energizing the Democrat community. So you have all of that, plus you have the in the last 6 years, the Democrats have out-registered by over 500,000 just in 6 years.
Yeah,
the
2 to
number
1
of
at least.
Republicans, and so even though the Republican leadership is saying, well, last month we got 14,000 more Republicans than Democrats. But what about the 500,000 Democrats have? So, they make up these stories that are technically true, but have no sense of reality. And they pound their chest. See, we're winning, we're winning. They did the same thing in San Francisco. In San Francisco, the Republicans said, we've registered the Democrats by 11% to 9%. Well, that 9% was 31,000 new Democrats. There are only 36,000 Republicans in San Francisco. So literally, they almost doubled the number of Republicans in San Francisco. And the Republican Party says, look how victorious we are.
Oh my gosh.
Steve, you got a good handle on this.
These people are mental cases.
Right.
They need to meet reality and see where they failed. So I don't see the Republicans. If I remember correctly, the candidate that we'll have against Costa is the mayor of Stockton, Kevin Lincoln. Lincoln literally won the mayor's race of Stockton as a Republican against the Republican Party. The Republican Party wouldn't help him.
Oh my gosh. So let's talk
in
about
his
the
county.
Republican Party. Where's our leadership there? How's that working for us in California? Where's the party leadership taking us?
Well, they're taking us down they're flushing us down the toilet.
Right.
They speak big. They take big bucks. The chair of the state Republican Party gets $250,000 a year to lose elections. The chair of the Democrat Party gets paid $127,500 a year to win elections. So they're making out for themselves, while the rest of us, they're asking $5 here, $10 here. 2 years ago, there were 7 people on the payroll of the state Republican Party that earned $150,000 or more, and that doesn't even count the consultants who they continually hire, who continually lose.
Well, Ellington, we do have some movement nationally. So McDaniels is gone from supposedly she's gone from the national Republican chairwoman because Trump she's gone. So they put the new team in there. Is that going to affect us? Are we going to be able to get better leadership in California? When does that come up? When does Jessica Patterson come up for re-election? Is she even running?
She comes up in February, but she's not eligible to run. She's term limited, but like the last time she was term limited, she changed the rules so she could run again. And considering that it's $250,000 not to do anything victorious, and to make sure conservatives, every time a conservative runs around the state, they try to find a moderate to liberal Republican to run against them so that conservatives don't win elections in the primary.
Well, I think with Michael Maher, there was the thing that caught him was the redistricting.
That was brutal.
I think he won by a small margin in the old district.
Right.
But the redistricting caused him to lose.
Yeah.
And the other side of it, I think that I haven't heard brought up is the impact of the Hispanic vote in California. A lot of the old-time families are turning very conservative, and they're doing this really fast. And I think it's going to catch the Democrats off guard a bit.
Well, now we've got another interesting race. We've got, I can never pronounce his name right, but I'll give it a shot here. We have George Radonovich, who's older and more experienced. Then we have David Tagapa, who's younger and aggressive. How do you read that one, Steve?
Well, full disclosure, George Radonovich and I are close friends, and I worked for him back in the early 2000s as a consultant on one of his races. I like George very much. The other gentleman is part of the Republican establishment. He is the Fresno version of Vince Vaughn.
Oh, boy.
And so I've endorsed George, and I think we need experienced leadership that is aggressive. And when George was in Congress, he took leadership on numerous issues important to the Valley, including the wine growing and agriculture. That was a specialty in Congress, those issues. And so I think it's going to be a very close race. And you can look at the endorsements and you can see the establishment on one side and the activists and conservatives on the other.
Well, that's an interesting insight because people don't know. I don't think many people really know David. They don't know his whole background. But George has been around a long time. They do know him, at least in his former district. So what else do we have going on that makes a difference for us in the Central Valley in Fresno County? There's no other seats that I can think of that are really up for grabs.
Well, it's not the seats that are up for grabs. It's this Measure E.
Oh, boy.
That is a barn burner. It really tells a story about the establishment versus the people.
Yeah, I'm a graduate of Fresno State, right?
Yeah, right.
And the thing that crosses my mind is the fact that there's not one government budget that can't be cut 25% or more across the country, both in state, federal, and local governments. And when the government is not allocating funds to Fresno State, and for you to have to go to a bond issue in Measure E, I think is a testimony of how bad the monetary management of the state is.
Well, yeah.
In education. And I myself, I'm against the bond issue, Measure E. And I just think that I had a close association with a lot of universities around the country. My wife was a professor in charge of doctoral program, and so I was close to a lot of the liberal structure in the universities. And there are so many programs that they put in degrees out that are just meaningless.
Right.
And I attended a ceremony of the Department of Communication at University of New Mexico, and it was just appalling what I saw as degrees, and even in PhD programs, what was accepted as dissertations, and how things were excused. And people are getting worthless degrees, and most of the people never work in the degree field anyway. They're working outside that. So I think there needs to be a restructure of that, look at it. They can consolidate a lot of things, and they're not doing it. So I go back. I think any budget can be squeezed at a minimum of 25%. And that funding is already there. It just needs to be reallocated.
Well, look at the status of our state economically. I don't know what the deficit is, but it's big. What do you think, Steve?
Well, let me suggest the real problem with Measure E is not the local tax to help Fresno State. It sets a precedent that the state of California can now use, if it was passed, to say to other cities, you like UCLA, you like Cal Poly
That's a good point.
Pomona, you pass some sales taxes and give us the money. State college is a function of the state of California, not the city or county of Fresno. And so the state has to pony up the money, not the people in Clovis.
So it becomes the nanny state knows best.
Exactly. Very good point.
Yeah. Well, I think there's hope. I'm optimistic, but yet, how do you translate that into votes? So I'm still trying to figure that out. We're working hard here in our organization to encourage people and get the message out. We're walking every day. We have people walking and coming and getting materials. And then I'm doing Christian News Magazine, which in an attempt to appeal to the Christian community to vote. That's another dismal statistic. 25% of people who call themselves Christians, according to surveys that they've taken, actually vote. 50% register. So there's things going on. We're making different efforts, but what's the solution? Ellington, what do you see as a solution to our problem right now?
Well, I think it's actually getting people who are registered to follow through and vote.
Yeah, exactly right.
And they need to understand how present situations are impacting them. I don't think a lot of them realize that the middle class is working hard. They don't have time to follow all of these things.
But the kitchen table issues really used to matter. I don't know if they matter so much anymore.
People don't discuss them, and they only realize it when it affects them directly.
Right.
And that realization doesn't exist across the board.
Steve, what's your thought? What solutions do we have?
Make it personal. Get people to realize that if they could get a 20.25% sales tax this time, they can go to a 0.5% sales tax next time. If they like people who use smear tactics to run for office, God bless them. But if you want an honest campaign based on issues and policy, vote that way. Punish those who smear others.
Exactly. Well, I think we've given people some good information on this program today with the fact that there are things going on that we can change. There is an alignment. There is a movement towards changing all of this craziness, but then it just becomes so hard to get them to act.
I think one of the things on the local level of the school board issues, I think a lot of parents have become aware because of the activities of groups like we have here, of what's going on the agenda and the teaching within our schools, what's been approved by school boards, what's approved by the state, and becoming activists on the local level with your board of supervisors, your county board of supervisors, your school officials. I think we've done a pretty good job of that, especially in Fresno County and in areas of Tulare County. I've seen it. So that's one area that I think has come alive a lot.
But that is our Achilles heel. The young vote, the school age kids, the college kids, that really is where we probably are the weakest. What do you think, Steve?
Oh, absolutely the weakest, but the greatest chance for an opportunity for growth. And the reason for that is Gen Xers now are noticing that when they get a pay stub, a lot of money is missing. I thought they earned $100, they only get 50. Well, where'd the other money go? They notice that the cost of going out on a date, they can't do it. And so they're beginning to realize that the government, that the cost of living is high. Now we have to do is make the connection between government action and the cost of living. So they understand that Bidenomics is used against them, not for them. And as they see that, and as they realize they got no education whatsoever in government schools, let me give you one great example. In the state of California last year, 56% of the kids who got high school diplomas from California government schools did not qualify to even apply to state colleges or universities. 56%.
Amazing. Amazing.
And so that tells them that they didn't get a failed education. They didn't get an education at all. They are functional illiterates and certainly non-functioning economic illiterates.
But this is what the Democrats want, because if they can have an illiterate group, they can control.
And that's the whole indoctrination thing. The teachers are coming out now. Well, the teachers union, there's another, drama going on with power and control and shaping things in California. That teachers union is vicious.
Well, absolutely. It's not only vicious, it's an extortion.
Yeah.
If you want a good job in a school and you want to get promotions, you better belong to the union, because if you don't, you're going to be stuck in the classroom and never be allowed out. And so they use that power, and then they use these teachers to walk precincts for Democrat candidates that continue the power. And what do the unions stand for? Lying to the parents. They are the ones that are behind the state laws that tell teachers, do not tell the truth to the parents about your children's emotional stability.
That is just stunning. Just stunning. Well, I think we can believe that we're at least moving forward. We have some reason to hope and think that we can change things. So we're down to about 2 minutes in the program. Ellington, why don't you take a minute and just speak to people. What do you think? What's your advice? And how do you see us succeeding?
Well, I go back to the area you talk about Christians not voting. And I think our churches need to spur their congregations to get proactive.
I do too. I think you're absolutely right.
And I catch a hold of that one. That's one that can be handled directly.
Right.
And
we can have an impact on that.
I have to excuse myself. I've got to.
Well, Steve, the same thing is true with what you're saying. And so why don't you take a minute, Steve, and just give your advice to people?
People need to take control of the government, not have government take control of them.
Nice.
They need to be responsible for city council races, school board races, as well as assembly, state senate, and congressional. They need to be, I have a saying, it's terrible, but it's true. You never go broke underestimating the intelligence of the voter. And that's what the Democrats count on. And as long as we have people who don't know the facts, don't know the truth, don't have an idea as to what it means, we'll continue to have government try to control us.
I agree with you completely. And what a great show. I sure enjoy having both of you on the the program and hearing your wisdom and expertise. Ellington, you have been blessing us for so long. Steve, thank you. And I thank everyone that's listening and watching us. We're not giving up. We're wild about liberty. So we're going to keep moving and trusting God that we can have an impact. Thank you for tuning in. God bless.
And they can't take that